Shana Tova, everyone. Last month, I found myself standing at an intersection in Hebron, the most populous city in the West Bank. The street, Ashuhada, was once a busy thoroughfare that led to the city's central market. But for the past few decades, it has been designated a tzir sterili, a sterile road, meaning that no Palestinian is allowed to traverse it, whether by car or on foot. Its stores have been closed, their doors welded shut. Straight ahead is the concrete wall that separates the old quarter, administered by Israel, from the rest of the city, which is controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Although it's noon, on a workday, the intersection is quiet. With its maze of walls, watchtowers, and checkpoints, Hebron has become an archetype for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Its roads are dotted with memorials, a testament to the violence that has shaped the West Bank. Abandoned apartments and shuttered storefronts tell another story of fear, distrust, and displacement. And there is a quieter narrative as well, one spoken between its residents, each street corner, each park and market square marked by loss. It is also a profoundly holy city, built around the tomb of the patriarchs. The Torah tells us that Abraham purchased this cave to bury Sarah, his wife. And when he died, Abraham was also buried there. And in time, it became the resting place of his children, our genetic and spiritual ancestors, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah. I had come to Hebron because I wanted to see the West Bank, to understand the lives of the people who call this place home. I was prepared for the challenge of shifting through conflicting narratives, Palestinian and Israeli, to debate how we might find a pathway to peace if it was still possible. But I was not prepared for the pain of each person that I encountered. The pain of the Palestinians is a quiet and persistent ache. It confronts you in the emptiness of sterilized streets, peering from the broken windows and locked doors of their homes. It's felt in the call to prayer as it echoes between abandoned buildings. The pain of the settlers arrives suddenly. One of them grabs me as I turn a corner. My neighbor was stabbed to death right where you're standing, he tells me. Don't you care about us? He is angry, yes, but it's an anger that has found its origin in grief. The pain of the soldiers is more subtle. You have to look for it, but it's there, weighing heavily on their shoulders, the burden of executing narrow, at times conflicting orders within a vast and ever-changing landscape. So many of them just want to go home. How do we account for this pain? And to whom do we owe witness? When confronted with so much violence and loss, it is easy to become numb. It's a survival mechanism that helps us navigate a world at war. For we are naturally empathic creatures. It's in our biology. Studies show that when we see, for example, someone crying, the part of our brain associated with sadness is activated. We feel and internalize their sorrow. Yet there are times when we must ignore this input so that rather than becoming mired in the brokenness of an imperfect world, we can continue living our lives. Without the ability to dissociate from this pain, we would be overwhelmed. Yet, we find ourselves in the season of confrontation. Yom Kippur is a time of calling to mind the imperfections of the past year and figuring out how we can make ourselves, our communities, and this world better. We are awakened to this task by the sound of the shofar. It's our alarm clock telling us that it is time for teshuvah, for seeking and offering forgiveness. This is the moment to take it all in, where we have been successful and where we have failed, our gains and our losses, where we have felt pain and where pain has been felt by others. When the shofar is sounded, we hear three different noises. The first is a tekiah, a continuous blast. The second, shivarim, is composed of 3 short bursts. The third, truah, a set of 9 staccato blasts. The tekiah is a battle cry calling us to action. Now is the time for teshuvah. It is also the sound of joy, the blessing of repair and renewal that this season brings us. Another year lies ahead, offering the possibility of getting it right. Yet the rabbis compare the shivarim and the truah to the sound of weeping, the shuddering gasp and sharp cries of a person in pain. In order to repair what has been broken, we must confront the ruptures in our lives and the lives of those around us, both the harm that has been done to us and the injury that we have caused others. We are awakened to the social injustices that we have tolerated over this past year. We just read from Leviticus 19, which outlines how we can create a more equitable society, to provide for the hungry, to pay a living wage, to support those living with disabilities, to give due process and render fair judgment. Hearing this list, we are made aware of the gap that exists between this vision and the world that we live in. The shofar becomes the cry of the least among us, waking us to the task of ensuring liberty and enacting justice for those who exist on the margins of our society. The rabbis teach that the first person to cry out the sounds of shivarim and truah was the mother of Sisera. Who was Sisera? Sisera was a fearsome and feared general who used his forces to oppress the Israelites. After 20 years under his rule, our ancestors were able to overthrow his army. While fleeing the battle, Sisera, this general, was killed. This was cause for celebration. After 2 decades of servitude, the Israelites were again free. Yet the story does not end here. We are told that when Sisera did not return home, his mother let out 101 cries. These became the 100 blasts we hear on Rosh Hashanah and the closing Tekiah Gedolah of Yom Kippur of this day. This is a radical proposal, that during these days of awe, as we reimagine what the world could be in 5779, we not only listen to the cry of the least among us, but open ourselves to the pain of the other, even those we call our enemies. Sisera's mother demands that we transcend the divisions of fear, hatred, and distrust to bear witness to her sorrow, to see her for who she is, a parent mourning the death of her child. Are we open to this task? Can we create space for the pain of those who think and act differently than us, even those who threaten our way of life? At the end of my time in Hebron, I visited the Tomb of the Patriarchs. It's an imposing stone building, divided into halves, one Jewish and one Muslim. I stopped to pray at the tomb of Abraham, first of our people, our historic and mythical forefather. As I stood next to the small window overlooking his grave, I realized that I could hear whispers of Arabic from the other side of the rotunda. This was, after all, his ancestor too. Abraham, the father of Isaac and Ishmael, progenitor of both Jews and Muslims. And here we stood in a city divided by impenetrable walls of concrete and hatred, all of us descendants of the same source. Fear can anesthetize us to the suffering of the other. It dulls our ability to be empathetic. If we are able to tolerate brokenness in our own communities, how much easier is it to ignore the pain of our enemies? Yet here comes the blast of the shofar. Now we hear the cry of Sisera's mother, the persistent reminder that we are all connected, descendants of the first Homo sapiens, beings created B'Tselem Elohim in the divine image. The same genetic heritage that endows us with the capacity for empathy also shows us that at a biological level, our perceived differences are negligible. And while history has emphasized our dissimilarity, we cannot allow it to deaden us to our shared humanity. Sisera's mother insists that no matter how high we have built the wall between us, we still have the ability to bear witness to each other's pain. Now, this is not to say that we cannot disagree on how we might heal the brokenness of this world. Whether in Hebron or New York, we can and we should have debates, rigorous debates, about policy, about procedure, about the best path forward. If anything I have said bothers you, talk to me. Today, after services, or sometime in the future, you can find all of my contact information on the CBST website. Because I believe that it is only through dialogue that we can reach understanding. But what cannot be up for argument, what we cannot debate, is the humanity of the other. Within this din of disagreement, we cannot risk ignoring the cry of the least among us, whether or not she looks like us, whether or not she is our mother or the mother of our enemy. The shofar cries. Now is the time to listen. May this coming year, 5779, be one of repair and renewal. May it be the one that heals the pain of all people. And if it is not, if it's not that year, may it be the year that allows us to expand our capacity for empathy, to have hearts that can meet the other, even in our difference. Shana Tova.